Well, g'day friends, welcome back to Tutorial. I think it's been pretty clear that over the last couple of weeks, my biggest struggles in City Skylines 2 has got to be the terraforming, and that's a bit of a surprise to me because in City Skylines 1, I felt pretty good at this sort of stuff, I was all over it, but in City Skylines 2, I've been taking down a couple of pegs. So today I'm going to focus on some wins, keep things local, keep things a little bit smaller, and just focus on the terraforming around the city and trying to make some areas really work. Here's New Dimesburg, looking all pretty with all its trees surrounding the place. I've left the simulation run for a little while and I've just been tinkering at the game just off camera, just so I could get this place looking a little bit more established. As well as the trees just needed a bit of time to get a little bit more grown up, and a lot of these are on their way to be fully grown, which is absolutely lovely, including the ones that are down in the park that we built in the last episode, which is looking a little bit more established. Super nice. I've also been messing with my graphics a little bit. I turned off fog in the last episode and I think that was a bit of a mistake because we didn't have any clouds or anything else around the city, and I felt like it just left a little bit to be desired in terms of depth and realism. So I've turned it back on and I think it's looking a whole lot nicer. Here's the rest of my settings if you're curious. I'm just going to scroll through this fairly quickly. If you want to pause and have a bit of a gander, go for gold. Alright, in terms of the city, so things are starting to look a little bit more established, and I would like to figure out what the city is going to be doing as it creeps over into this hillside. It's even kind of hard to see with the contour lines, so I'll just kind of show you whereabouts it is. This is the highest point. There's a bit of a mountain up here, and then we've got the second highest point where this neighborhood's going to sit. But you can really see how much I've changed the landscape of this map already. I mean, all of up here was a gradual slope down to the bay, and that was pretty extreme. In New York City, on this side of the Hudson River, all these cities and neighborhoods seem to sit on this ridge, on this plateau that rises up above the Hudson River and creates all these really fun interactions with the urban environment and this natural environment as they snake their way up into the cliffside, or the rail infrastructure, and all these bits and pieces, all these quirks that seem to happen when you've got these changes in terrain. And it's not just New Dimesburg, but this ridge is going to kind of spread across this whole area. So our version of Stratton Island will feature all those hills and mountains and that ridge, and then it'll kind of stretch around here as well and interact with this environment too. So it's going to be pretty cool. This whole area is going to be influenced by that. I think roads would be a good starting place. This section is actually a little bit lower down, or at least a little bit closer to this level than this point up here and this point over there. And I would like there to be a bit of a gap between New Dimesburg and whatever this neighborhood is going to be. So I think almost starting a second city up here with a bit of a road layout that is influenced by this layout. In fact, I think that whatever this is going to be has influenced the way that this is a bit different to the rest of this city. Okay, I'm gonna get too rigid up here because all of this area in New Jersey, Five Corners, Bergen, this is all pretty willy-nilly in terms of road layout. It gets all pretty hairy, you kind of just do whatever you like. Yeah, we've got a bit of a grid, but it's also kind of interesting. I feel like these guys are taking more inspiration from Sydney for their roads. I mean, Sydney's all over the place as well. So, I don't know. I think that we kind of go a little more willy-nilly. Also, I was just struck with a really great or really silly idea for this section over here, just to kind of give a reason why this is kind of all over the place. It's kind of fun. I think I might do it next. I know, it's all over the place. There's going to be some serious problems. I hate to admit it, bucko, but sometimes cities have got some pretty bad layouts. I am all for it. In fact, this guy down here, this is going to just crumble and fall to its knees because I'm going to connect this up to probably an outside connection. And when we've got some high rises around here and public transport and all that sort of stuff, yeah, it's going to just fall to pieces. But don't worry, I'm going to make it up to you because I know you don't like this. How about if I add in a train? Yeah, you didn't expect that, did ya? In fact, I didn't expect that. I thought I had to build this before I could build some train lines. I guess not. Perfect, because I don't really want to see this function just yet. I just kind of want to stick it down and see what happens. Because New Jersey, Jersey City is very much influenced by a whole bunch of old train lines. All this would have been hauling freight down to the water's edge, down to the docks, and transporting goods over to New York City and beyond. So I kind of want to do something similar, because I think if we're going to be building this place based on that area and kind of giving purpose behind the docks that sit around here, we do need to have some rail lines, whether they are active or used to be active. They need to be down here so that they can start influencing the city and the way that the road layouts work. So I actually think that the reason why this road is the way that it is, the way that it's angled like that, is because it used to have a train line running up against it. So let's just see if we can maybe try and run a train line coming around here, navigating down this cliff face, and then heading towards what would have been an old freight yard. Not an old freight yard, an old dock. I want this to be an elevated line, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to select the level terrain tool, and I'm going to find a height difference like this, so I'm going to right click on there, and then I'm just going to kind of do this. Might dezone these guys. And then the same height all around here. Might be a little bit too high. And let's just stick some train lines on here, just for good fun. Ooh. Ooh, check out the clearance. That's not bad. I wonder if I can get it a little bit lower. I think that's a little bit more of a realistic height difference from the road to the rail line. So I'm going to try and make it so that maybe the road dips down into the ground a little bit more, and that way we can actually make that clearance. Because the annoying thing is that some places just have really low clearance, but you can't really just do that. You know, it wouldn't be nice if we could just add a sign that says low clearance or maximum of this height, and that way you could actually just drag that around and you wouldn't see any trucks or anything like that go underneath it. Whew, okay. So I reckon that is probably as high up as I can go, and look, I've even got one of these little bases. Beautiful. I wish I was on the other side, but that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Oh, I think I can. Come on. Oh, I did it. Oh yeah. Alright, check this out. The old abandoned train line I've been working on. I've been working on it for a little while now, and I'm actually getting really excited with how this is starting to take shape, especially with the fact that it kind of carves its way throughout the city, and you can kind of see remnants of it as well in different phases. Still see the train line here, whereas these sections are becoming really overgrown with trees, which we should go have a little look. Now, I do have to say these are all tiny trees because we still need to wait for them to grow. So it's a little bit hard to tell how this is actually going to look when all these are fully grown. And speaking of how big they're going to get, this is the London Plain. I've just been going around. Well, actually, a lot of these are just the wild bush. I've tried to sprinkle in a bunch of different types of trees, mostly just these guys, these little bushes, because they won't grow too big and you can get them pretty close to one another. But in terms of trees, we do have these London Plains, and they grow to about this size. So just as a bit of a reference. I've also put in a couple of oaks, but they get pretty big. So I actually think that might be a little bit too big for what I want to go up here. But I've also gone for smaller bushes because, you know, maybe this has been abandoned for, I don't know, maybe like 30, 40 years. So you have to kind of imagine how big some of these trees have gone. But my favorite part about all this is just how you can see where the path of the old rail line used to stretch all the way throughout the city, all up upon this embankment, and as it stretches towards the old docks. I also placed down this car park because I do feel like car parks do take the place of old train lines or old road infrastructure. These are usually the first thing to pop up. And then I'm also trying to think about what I should place around here and here, because some of these buildings, this is like an old brick apartment block, which I think would have probably been built at a similar time to when this rail line would have probably been operating. So for this to then pop up after this rail line was here doesn't really make a huge amount of sense. So I actually think that I'm gonna just pause it, and we'll go with some low density offices, and we'll do that because I reckon something a little bit more modern would be here instead. Because one of my all-time favorite things about old train lines stretching throughout cities is just how you can see the path even though it's no longer there anymore. You can sort of see what used to be there and then what is there now and how it's changed over time. It always really fascinates me, and you can kind of see it when you start noticing these things. You can really notice it, and that's just one of those rabbit holes I totally get lost down when I am flying around Google Earth, which seems to be every single day, let's be honest. So when we do start working around here a little bit more, I like to really think about what that would have looked like, where that train line would have stretched around, and maybe even add in a couple of extra little bits and pieces so you can actually see where that used to stretch. But in terms of this embankment, I mean, this is not its final form. We're really just gonna have to wait and see how all these trees grow, how these little bushes form this big plateau of all this foliage up here. So we'll just have to wait and see how that's gonna look. I did put in this little alleyway too. I just put it into this one little section, and then I had some paths just to kind of show where potentially maybe an alleyway used to sit, but they've probably disconnected it because I reckon you'd get a lot of sneaky boys just driving up here and causing all sorts of havoc around some of these intersections. Plus, this would probably be a pretty good bike path if we did have bikes in City Skylines 2, which we don't, but no doubt we will at some stage, and I'll totally turn that into a bike path. And if I had more control, we would probably put more concrete around here. I don't like how green these spaces are. You know, this is a sort of area that I think would totally need a fence and some trash cans and a bit of an alleyway that really reflected more of an alleyway. At the moment, it's a little bit wild. Again, I am waiting for these trees to grow, and then once I know what they're going to look like, then I'll start going through and demolishing some of them. But yeah, this is too green for my liking, not for a place like this. I would like this to be a little bit more built up, but that's fine. And then for the rest of this train line, I have just dragged it underground here. This is not perfect. In fact, I'm gonna go back and just demolish this guy. See you later. Because trains do not like going down slopes quite as much as that. But then I also don't really want this to be completely underground. I kind of wanted to go underground for this section here as it goes underneath this road, but then poke up around this section and go into a bit of a trench. So rather than it dipping down into the ground, I'm just gonna drop the brush size. I'm gonna right click here. This is I pretty much only ever use the level terrain tool rather than using any of the others. I will go and use this one. I've never used that one. It could be useful. Let me know if you use it. But I basically just right click that one so that I can find the perfect level so that it does stay at the same gradient and not really dip down any further, because I think the train will like that. And I know that this is an abandoned line, so it doesn't really matter, but here's the thing. I think that only part of this line is going to be abandoned. The rest of it, I'm not quite sure. I'm going to demolish that road, and we're going to drag out the train line first because the train line is a little bit less forgiving, whereas the road, roads can be a little bit more forgiving in this game. I'm just going to do a bit of this because the height of the land won't really affect the tunnel once I've got the tunnel down. And I want the train line to pretty much be at the same level the entire way. Look at that. See that? We've already got a great tunnel. That's exactly where I want it. So what I ended up having to do was I actually had to make this terrain really high up. Otherwise it wasn't making the tunnel. But it does look a little bit odd. I think though, what I can do is I can drop it down dramatically like that. And that's not so bad. And it does look like I can drag a road over the top, which is fantastic, but I'm not gonna do that just yet because it's just one single tunnel at the moment. I wouldn't mind there being two, which does just throw a bit of a spanner in the works, but I'm all for it. Actually, you know what I'm gonna try and do? I'm gonna see what happens if we use these double train tracks. We're gonna go to parallel mode, and let's see what happens if we drag out a train line like this. We make a tunnel that works. So I'm stoked that it worked, but I have to admit it's not the most amazing tunnel. It could use a little bit of improving. I could align these up a little bit better, but I think the amount of time that I've just spent on this, I think I'm just going to leave it like that. These guys are aligned up pretty well. I'm really happy about that. And we can go through and just tailor these tunnels a little bit more. Now, I did mention this in the last episode, but this is so temporary because I am 100% going to be adding in my own custom. When I say my own, I mean I'm going to be adding in other people's custom assets into this save game, because I think if we're going to be making something based on New York, then we do need some better looking tunnels. I will keep it as vanilla as possible, you know, if there is possibilities for, you know, making it so that we can create places and use bits and pieces that will work in vanilla for New York, then I totally will. But for things like train lines, you know, as soon as, and let's be honest, as soon as Revo releases some sort of train lines and Bisquigglehausen produces some sort of rail cars and New York inspired trains, I'll be jumping all on them. But what I do really like about what I'm doing at the moment is that we're kind of putting in place all the roads and all the ideas of where the trains are going to go. And then when we start introducing custom assets and mods, then all of the infrastructure is going to be down here. And this is essentially what I was doing in City Skylines 1. I was pretty much just trying to get down the bare bones of my cities and my layouts and get an idea of where things are going to go, and then go back and detail places up. So that's kind of my plan. So when you see things like this not aligning up perfectly, part of me wants to go and just have another crack at it. But then I'm also sort of thinking, I don't know how long these train lines are going to stay here. Granted, I don't know when we're going to start getting custom assets into the game, but I'll be all over that. And in terms of where this train line is going to go, I'm sort of imagining that we're going to create a train line that snakes its way down this way and potentially goes out towards our industrial zone, or maybe it even hooks up to some sort of rail yard. Although these guys are pretty big, so I don't know if I'm going to be placing this guy anywhere around here. Or maybe will, I don't really know yet. Now, if you haven't figured out the reference yet, all this area is based on the train line that stretches down through Journal Square and Five Corners and Bergen. All these places sit above Jersey City and are still functional. You can see that there are still trains using this area, and I'm pretty sure there's a train station down here. I'm not quite sure. I don't really do enough research in these videos to really figure this sort of stuff out. But then the line going down into Jersey City, this is all abandoned. This was most probably freight that was coming down to the docks, but is no longer in use. I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole with train lines that stretch all around this area. That's coming up. Not today, though. This is meant to be more about terraforming. Speaking of which, we should probably get back to that. Yeah, that's right, Sunny Jim, because if I'm going to use that super sweet title and thumbnail for this video that only 5% of my audience is going to get, yeah, I better get back to terraforming. And I do have to admit that all this train work that I'm doing right now, this was not the intention for this episode. I have just been going down an absolute rabbit hole, but I'm pretty much just going to leave it at this little section because I would like to focus on all this a little later on and focus on, you know, figuring out that layout and where everything's going to go and how it's going to connect up our city. If you have any suggestions for that, please let me know, because I am just going to be kind of just dragging it out and, you know, trying to imagine where it used to go and where it does go now. And like I've said many times before, I'm not a train expert, but I'm definitely a train fan, which I think a lot of you guys could probably fit into the same category. But regardless, we are just figuring out this network and how it's going to connect up a couple of different areas. And I have to try and navigate how it's going to interact with this landscape, which is pretty hilly in some places. You know, I gave the map a bit of criticism for having just a ridiculous gradient and just unrealistic and kind of annoying landscape to work with in terms of terraforming. But, you know, that is in terms of it just doesn't really do anything that interesting. Apart from the mountains on the sides, the rest of it is pretty uninspiring. So this is me trying to figure out what would be kind of interesting around here. You know, these height differences are so different compared to the rest of the map and the mountains and everything else. In fact, if you were to see the mountains on the surrounding sides of the city where I've terraformed all around, then you'll see that it's actually so much lower down, and all these hills and things that I'm working on are way more or less extreme than all the other places around here. But I do think it's important to make these places feel more interesting rather than just having it as one slope that stretches all the way down from the mountains, trying to figure out how these are going to make or even impact the way that the city is laid out, and, you know, trying to figure out how the infrastructure fits around it too. I think infrastructure wise, it's not as hard, but when it comes to zoning, it becomes pretty tricky. As you can see what I'm doing right now, I am trying to zone so that we're filling up a lot of the spaces in what is a really difficult place to zone out. I'm using a technique that someone mentioned in the last episode where I was complaining that you couldn't really decide whereabouts your buildings were going to be zoned on in terms of the road because, you know, sometimes it'll just be determined that it's going to zone on this road. Well, you can actually use a path to kind of prevent it from zoning on that road, and then when you have finally zoned up and built out the area that you wanted to zone up, then you can just go back and demolish that path, which is a really great way of doing this. But I mean, I am so holding out for some sort of zone toggler or even just being able to plop some of the buildings, because zoning doesn't really work on corners like this. And it's going to be really tricky to make this all work. By the way, in the next episode, I'm going to be focusing on zoning out that city that we just started to kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like in terms of the road layout. I'll be zoning that out and focusing on that build and talking more about advanced zoning techniques, I guess. I say advanced techniques, but really I think that's probably just a way of getting you to click the video. Because to be honest, I am still so much in the learning phase of this game. There's still so much I need to figure out, and even that path technique, it's so simple, and so of course that's what you do, but I didn't know that until someone mentioned it. So please hit me up if you see me do anything you think, I don't know about that, maybe you should try this. Hit me up, because I probably don't know that. Because I'm sure that you guys are in the same boat as me. So many of the things that we could do in City Skylines 1, you can't really do in City Skylines 2, and there's just a bit of a learning curve. I haven't really figured out everything, and there's going to be so many things that I will have to take a while to, you know, get my bearings around and really practice some of the different, you know, tools and different aspects of this. You know, the whole finance and production and all that side of things, I haven't even really touched it because I'm not very good at that sort of stuff. I'm more kind of into the design of the city, the layout, and all that sort of stuff where it comes to the way that the place looks. I'm really into that sort of thing. The other parts of it, you know, making it actually function and maybe even traffic. Some would argue that I'm not very good at traffic. How dare you? Well, you're probably right there. But anyway, I hope you like the way this neighborhood looks. This is probably my favorite neighborhood that I've ever built in City Skylines 2, which is why I was really disappointed when my game crashed and I had to rebuild it all. Yeah. To finish off the time lapse, I wanted to add just a bit more detail to this college we have sitting up on this ridge. This has become a bit of a feature, so I feel like we need to add a little bit of extra detail here. Now, can we justify expanding out our college to handle more students? No, not really, but I'm gonna do it because I just like the way it looks, and I also want to figure out how this is going to finally look, you know, the final stage of this. We don't need to expand it, it's gonna be a big waste of money, but we're kind of not really losing money, even though we technically are. We're also technically not. And of course, there's not a huge amount of detail you can really add to these buildings. You can't even really connect up these paths to the buildings. You have to kind of imagine that they're connected up and kind of drag them and hope that a tree will eventually grow and just cover up those parts that don't really look like they're connecting up. That's fine, because at some stage, you do know it. At some stage, we're going to have the ability to just drag out paths wherever you like, whether we're using a mod or whether they introduce it into the game. But at the moment, you can't do it, which is a real bummer, but it's fine. All these areas, like I mentioned, we're going to have to come back and kind of just change them up and add extra bits and pieces and really make these places feel a little bit more detailed. But for now, I'm pretty happy with just kind of figuring out where they sit, playing with some of the vanilla assets, because I actually really like this college. I'll probably not change this asset. I'll probably just keep it here. You can imagine the buildings and the networks and the bits and pieces that we're going to change and the things that we're going to keep. And I look forward to a time where we look back at some of the builds that we completed during this early stages of City Skylines 2 and we think, oh man, things weren't good back then, were they? It's similar in City Skylines 1. I remember looking back at some of the builds that were done before Move It or done before Anarchy, and you kind of go, oh boy, okay, things have changed. It holds up for now, but down the track, it's not gonna hold up. And I'm totally fine about that because I still haven't learnt all the tricks in City Skylines 2. So I'm happy with just playing around with the things that you can do, having a go at some of the roads and some of the rail lines. I haven't built any highways yet. That's some of my favorite parts. Don't worry, they're coming. But anyway, back to the live play. It's autumn, the leaves are falling, and we've also got some trains. Oh yeah, so yeah, I have connected up our train line. Was it a bit of a waste of money? Is it completely useless? Yes and yes. But no regrets because I love seeing trains just use this tiny little section. Even if it is just this tiny little section, I do love it so much. Just seeing them navigate between these row houses and through the tunnel, which is all rendered and just wonderful looking, by the way. A little bit steep down there, but don't worry too much about that because it's probably not going to go in that direction. In fact, when we do connect up our train line, it's probably going to go out this way and maybe like another one going out here. There's gonna be train lines going all the way through this place, but that's a story for another day. But for now, let's just appreciate the autumn colors and, you know, this is only going to get so much nicer when all these trees are fully grown. You can see all these ones around here, which definitely need to be fully grown. So I do just have to wait for them. They're going to grow to the size of this, which is excellent. And by the way, with the trees, I have really gone overboard with the amount of trees that I've planted around here. The idea is that you plant it all first, wait for the trees to grow, and then you go through and just delete the ones that you don't want. And that way you can get a good idea of the size of these things and the spaces that you want to create. So that's kind of what the plan is with that. We've got some white trees in here, which is kind of annoying. Now, I have to say the roads are purposely chaotic. I don't really want to put too much in place in terms of like road rules and putting in highways and, you know, even upgrading some of these roads, which they absolutely could be upgraded. But I do like the idea that we will upgrade these when they are at breaking point. But at the moment, they are doing just fine. Even if they are kind of hairy in some places, you know, that's not great. I'm going to leave it. We're going to do whole episodes where we just work on these sections because I think that'd be kind of more exciting. But let's just appreciate the slopiness of this area because I think it's really interesting the way that this sort of slopes up onto this ridge here. I'm definitely still working out how all this is going to look, but I do love some of these buildings, the way that they are, like particularly like this one, because it does create this little wall that kind of sits around here, which is sort of cool. Yeah, we're going to get a bit of that, but that's fine. And like I've mentioned before, but this is all going to be pretty different when we start adding in some mods and stuff, because I reckon we'll be able to add in some keys around here. And I really like the fact that we've got, you know, these different types of bridges. You know, got this one bridge here, and then you go down the hill and you got this other one. And this has really changed this slope that this road takes now. It's really changed the way that that kind of goes down into these areas. Kind of interesting. And just something else to keep in mind. At the moment, we don't have any highways. My plan is to add a highway that is going to stretch around here. So if you do know Jersey City, then you do know that there is a highway, an elevated highway that does kind of separate the two sections, the higher up area, the area that is up on this hillside, and then the area that is down the Jersey City side of it. And I would like to do something similar. I don't know if it's going to go through this area because I do really like what's happening already. But over here, for sure, I reckon there'll definitely be an elevated highway at some stage. Hold on one second. This beautiful road. Oh man. Oh, I really wish I could have placed that there, but there's no chance. Oh, actually, hold on. Let me just think about this. Do I really want to? Feels like a bit of a waste of time after doing all that work. I don't even know if it's going to fit. Actually, you know what? Let's quickly save it. All right, it's saved. Let's just do something crazy for 1 second. All right, so that's obviously not going to work, but what about if maybe if we did this and this and this, and perhaps this is just raised up a little bit more. All right, that's just not gonna work. I've got another idea. Alright, it's not gonna happen. Even though we've got plenty of clearance under here, the game will not let me drag that bridge any more of a slope, which is an absolute bummer because we definitely do have space for it, but that is fine because I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna wait until we have some sort of anarchy enabled, which we all know is definitely gonna be something in terms of the mods. I'm sure they're gonna mod it so that we can do something like that, and I'm gonna do it. So for now, that ain't gonna work. And that's a shame. And we're back. All right. Before we wrap up, there's still just one more thing I wanna do. Okay, I think this is gonna be more challenging than I expected. I want there to be a nice little path that stretches its way up to the top of this little lookout. This is gonna be a bit of a park up here. Of course, this is just for showsies because no one's actually gonna walk up. Actually, maybe they will. They probably won't. Yeah, so what I wanna see is a bit of a railing around here and some real tight turns like that. But I would really like it if the railing is on one side and then the other side is kind of like cut into the cliff. So let's give that a try. So I'm gonna flatten over here so we've got a nice sharp edge. Ooh, and even like that. Jeez, that's pretty cool. I might just smooth out a couple of these edges. I kind of like that one. I might even place some larger trees just to cover up a couple of the imperfections. Maybe even like these guys. Ooh, let's get a big guy. Ooh, too big. There we go. We'll make just a bit of a clearing up here so people can see the views. Actually, you know what? Speaking of the views, how does it look? Kind of nice. Well, that tree's in the way. Yeah. Ooh, imagine when we've got a big city over here. That's gonna be lovely. Or those chimneys. I like them too. Yeah, this is pretty. Alright, nice little spot up here. And you know what? I think that's about it. I am really happy with how this whole area is starting to turn out. It's probably one of the more detailed suburbs and places that I've built in City Skylines 2, and I'm really keen to do more builds like this as you start figuring out the layout of some of these areas. I'm really happy about all this. So what do you guys reckon? I'm gonna continue to flesh out some more of these spaces like this neighborhood up here, and of course we're gonna wait for these trees to grow and see how all this is gonna look. In fact, I'm gonna speed run through a couple of months and we'll probably have some cinematics at the end where it's all green so we can see just how big some of these trees are gonna get, or at least a bit of an idea of how they're gonna get. But I'm gonna do a bit of a tutorial on how to zone up these areas that are a little bit more all over the place, you know, not exactly the most standard of grids, and trying to get this nice and detailed in terms of zoning. So that'll be the next video that we produce. It'll probably be a bit more of a smaller episode because I'm going to be doing more of a tutorial, so that'll be on that. And do let me know if there's any more things you want me to give any tutorials on or share my thoughts about, because I'm basically doing that episode and this episode because people are suggesting it, so please hit me up. But my friends, thank you all so much for watching today's episode. Big cheers to you all, really appreciate it. If you're wondering when videos are out, they're mostly out on Saturdays at about 11 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time. And sometimes it might be a little bonus one, I might get them out on Thursday, but we'll see how it goes. The next episode will be a bit more tutorial based, a bit more chill, and probably more just keeping it to a live play. So there might be an extra one, I don't really know, I haven't recorded it yet. But until then, I hope you all have a great week, and a big shout out to the wonderful people over on Patreon supporting the channel: Andy Jones, Rachel, Thomas Puckridge, Claire, Salmon V, Sherisville, Big393, Kendrick BC, and Roger Davies. Cheers legends, I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.